the distinguished speaker steps to the stage, podium, and all of you think it's terrific that he or she is here, what that little piece of money wouldn't do for my theater. I'm not saying it's a lot, I'm just saying my department could use just... That's the subtext of this moment. And it is palpable here at the ATHE podium. I am so honored to be asked to be here, but scared to death. It is a palpable subtext. Moreover, subtext, because we all work in the theater, is nothing fancy, nothing mysterious. If this were an address to a civilian audience, if this were a corporate sales imperative group or sales circle, or you could do several minutes just on subtext. And you could spin it out, and they would, or at least they would pretend to be really wowed by subtext. It is our meat and potatoes, so it's nothing fancy. The fact that in another gathering, one might spin out, some minutes on subtext, some minutes on context, some minutes on tone, the difference between a weak gesture and a power gesture. A few stories, Kathleen Turner stories, and I don't actually know that much about that world, but all of us who are freelancers, and that really, no matter how deep into academia you are, that's all of you. Those of us who are freelancers dream of a kind of El Dorado, whether it exists or not, where the fee is high and the bar is low. We dream of such a gig, but this is not that gig. This is a gathering en famille of people who do what we do. The people who sat across this stage and received awards, first of all, they gave the keynote I wanted to give several times over. So it was an inspiring hour and something to hear every recipient. And so, standing before you, like I say, en famille, and also slightly, I don't know, is one leg longer than the other, or is it just... I don't know if any of you know that this is an adjustable podium. Stumped you there, didn't I? No, just even in the digital age, you still have to go to manual sometimes. It is tempting on familia like this to, well, it's tempting to take out every party trick I know. So I would like this to be an address that is useful to you, that you may be able to think back on, that at least passes this hour pleasurably. And so, given that, it is tempting to pass by the premise statement that I would almost certainly dive into, were you all civilians? Were this a civilian gathering, I would talk with force about how the theater is useful and the theater is necessary. You see, in another gathering, I might have to really make that case. We are all, and often our livelihoods and our 401ks are dedicated to the idea that the theater is useful and the theater is necessary. The question for us is whether we really believe it. It is a question we've got to ask. We're forced to ask, and we must force ourselves to ask all the time, because without a bedrock of conviction, and it's hard on the long tech night of the soul sometimes to know that you really have that conviction, but it's without that conviction, we risk the dilemma, the purgatory that many a character whom our writers, our playwrights, create, a person who is living a lie, who has built a life around something they no longer quite can believe. And it is possible for us. It is something we have to ask ourselves. Otherwise, we do risk, like that flight attendant a couple of years ago. One of my great favorite stories, the guy who just drank 2 beers visibly in front of the passengers and deployed the slide. Some dark tech night, literal tech night with 4 to 40 post-adolescents in costume and makeup, and high as kites, hopefully only on adrenaline, which only makes them text more. Some night we will all be tempted to deploy that slide and say, out of here. The thing about that story that has become, couldn't miss it in the news a couple of years ago, but I just happened to have caught that gentleman a couple times since. He's wanting his job back. Turns out he loved flying, he loved people. He just had too much on that particular night. His union, his employer, was not going to make it easy for him to return, but he's working very hard to return. This can happen to us unless we're sure, really deep in our hearts, that the theater is useful, the theater is necessary. So, tempting as it may be to slide by that and get to some sort of down and dirtier sharing of nuts and bolts with you about life in the theater, I want to take just a moment, in the hopes that it may be useful, either spiritually or in a funding document for you, to rehearse through why I feel the theater is useful and necessary. It's useful and necessary because it is it's only one of, but it is one of the ways in which the culture talks to itself. It's part of the body politic conversation. And it's not the central part, but the central part of the culture has CNN, Google, Fox News, the central nervous system and ocular nerve in the body. But there are more peripheral, or at least more mysterious ways in which even MDs are starting to acknowledge that the body talks within itself that we don't understand at all. And I submit that that's the case within the culture at large with the theater. The theater is a way, it's a lot of things, and neither me nor anybody else is going to sum it up in a statement or in a keynote, but the theater is a way in which we can talk about things that are not easy, sometimes not possible to talk about in any other way. And we must remember that when the dark tech night of the soul comes along. I have no proof, but I think the transformation of our society, if somebody born in 1950, I use the word transformation. Many of you on the front lines of LGBT work may think it's only motion toward individual transformation. As somebody whose son texted to his parents, Prop 8, DOMA, gone. I think that the transformation within our culture the changes unimaginable when I was growing up do have something to do with the conversation in the theater. Earlier civil rights struggles for racial equality, earlier in the 20th century, maybe not so much, maybe arguably not so much, but the place that LGBT people are now claiming in the society, I think, has been in some ways brought about by the conversation within the theater, and we should never be complacent, but we should be proud of that. The central place that the theater holds in the culture, of course, is the fact that human beings seem undeniably wired for story. Story is something we need, and if physical anthropologists can take a little fossil that I must confess I can hardly see, and they can see, well, we see by this that there was a species, broad shoulders, narrow hips, big incisors. If they can extrapolate that way, then I think we can extrapolate from 3,500 years of written drama, extrapolate backwards through tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, that human beings' story is a part of human beings that can never be taken out. It may be, if you wanted to look for one, it may be a threshold at which humanness began, having something to do with the story and telling of stories. Now, there are lots of ways to tell stories. Ours is the best. Ours is the best, but the hardest and the weirdest. I don't know if any of you wake up in the middle of the night and think, I pretend to be somebody else. It kind of boils down to sometimes what the sort of mediocre comics when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s used to say, it might go something like this. And that is really our mission statement. Guy unknowingly kills his father, marries his mother, might go something like that. And as silly and fatuous as our work often seems, and because we're human beings, some huge preponderance of it is silly and fatuous. But the importance of story and the importance of theater to story helps me go back to sleep at night sometimes. There was a story that some people, after a long day of teaching in an MFA program, was visiting a place, a school, and late into the night, when we should have been going to sleep, we started talking about a story that it might become a screenplay, and then everybody's ears perked up. Well, speaking of story and the central place of writers in our world, which is another thing we can be proud of in the theater. They don't tend to make very much money, but they are still central to the process. My favorite Polish joke, and many of you are too young to remember Polish jokes. It's not a pretty part of the history of American comedy at all. Polish jokes were very efficient because it's Polish, or sometimes even worse, Polak, and it's very efficient because that's the person who doesn't get it. So my favorite Polish joke is of the beautiful Polish actress who goes to Hollywood and sleeps with the writer. Now, the Polish actress might have gone to New York, or to a LORT theater, or to an academic city, slept with a playwright of any gender, identity, and the next day her career wouldn't be any farther along, but she would be expected to listen when that playwright spoke. And that's something we can be proud of. So late into the night, we talked about a story that might become a screenplay, or even better, a pilot, in which a youngish woman works at a college. She teaches, maybe we thought in the English department, I mean, no, let's go for it. She teaches in the theater department. Or maybe she has to teach in both in that institution. Plus PE and plus... and she is urging her students to break through things, to see things in a new way. She is also, because she's paid so little, she's also a dorm resident advisor. And in that capacity, she has to protect her students from certain knowledge, because parents are always on the phone saying, I do not want my child. So by day, she has to urge them over certain thresholds, and by night, she has to protect them. And it seemed to me, maybe a little too schematic, but an interesting story possibility for the profession of those of you who belong to the ATHE. It's a schizophrenic endeavor, pushing students, protecting students. And it made for a great evening of talking about the story, mainly because we kept returning to the story of the tiger and the monkey. The Tiger and the Monkey is my favorite story that seems to occur in different forms from all over the world, but the Asian version is sort of the most potent with it. Monkey sits on the tiger's shoulders and thinks he's driving. He thinks he's telling the tiger where to go. The tiger is actually going wherever the tiger needs to go out of hunger, and so as you can see, it's not going a pretty place, this story. It's not. But the wonderful moment, or the wonderful idea, it's like a complete comic idea, it's like almost a definition of clowning, is a monkey who thinks that he's driving the tiger. And when the tiger turns, he has to decide, I meant that way. Because he has to keep convincing himself that he is driving the tiger. That story, which you can see in various Chinese, I'm sorry, my apologies to David Henry Wong, my grounding, my references are old, and I tend to say Peking opera. The Chinese opera is a wonderful rendition of that I saw one time. It has kept that story alive long before Mr. Freud came along and gave us his take on the world. There was a story kept alive partly by oral tradition, partly by theater tradition, that I find the best example of clowning, or the best encapsulation of clowning. Somebody fooling himself that completely. Silence. The question is, what do we say to the young who feel they want to do this with their lives? And here is a thought I have to share. There's a wonderful book. It's almost 20 years old now. It's kind of passé, but it's a book I mentioned to people. Full disclosure, many people say, thank you for lending it to me. No, it didn't mean anything to me. But it's a book called The Sibling Society by Robert Bly. It says a lot of things, but one of the things I've taken is that we, as we get older, we have to think of ourselves as elders, and we have to step up to that. And in the theater, in the world of the theater, that can mean at 28, 29 years old, you are the elder in the group at hand. And there is an elder's responsibility to step up. What do we need to do as elders? It is, like I say, it's a schizoid responsibility, urging past a threshold, protecting. But this laundry list of people, we have to reclaim listening, and we have to help the youngest generation do that. I say that as a parent. We have to show young people that there is a way of listening that has nothing to do with this thing. And we have to make sure that a craft of listening does not get lost, even as we realize that stepping up to being elders, we will always be in that Molierian dilemma. We will always look and feel and be ridiculous. We cannot try to step into an elder's responsibility without being that blustery fool that Moliere always wrote. It's going to happen, but it is our responsibility to step up sometimes and say, I know that my way of looking at the world is old, I know it's outmoded, I know your generation is the generation that will go forward, but you've got to put that thing down, because if you want to be an actor, you have to look at the craft of listening. To want to be an actor without an interest in listening, without an application and a dedication to listening, it's like saying you want to be a dancer without an interest in walking. And it will not serve you to tether yourself to that thing and forget how to listen. It's not easy, but I didn't mean to pause dramatically for applause. I just... And if you thought that was an old fogey, this is one I find myself saying in MFA programs, in front of people who are already accomplished actors and well into their, but I'm old enough now to say, you want my advice? Make your bed, wash the dishes. It sounds like just an, and it partly is, just an old farts response to being old and looking at the young, but it is actually my truest advice to you, because it's the best way to fight despondency, depression, feeling defeated. It's the best way I know to give yourself the best chance to fight another day, is to give yourself every edge against the feeling that I don't know why I should do this. And it is true at 23, it's true at 63, and for whatever it's worth, I find myself passing it on fearlessly from time to time to young professionals. Here's some nuts and bolts questions. Do you read reviews or not? Everybody has to find their own policy. I don't read them. I rigorously do not read them until after the fact. Then I read them, and they're often very illustrative. They're less painful then, and they're less distracting then. But often I'll read them and think, oh, yeah, that's true. If I'd thought of that before opening night in previews. But that's the problem. Those words don't come to you except at a juncture at which I find them not useful. So that's my advice to young people. I don't read them until afterwards. There was one I read once, which has stayed with me 40 years now, 30 years now. Somebody said, when I was doing the aforementioned, thank you, sir, the aforementioned, the regarded flight we were doing in Los Angeles, somebody reviewed it and said, yeah, Erwin is talented, but I'll wait until he's not so eager to prove he's the smartest kid in the class. And yeah, but it was one of those that hit a receptive nerve, because I realized that is a tendency. Those of us who invent our own stuff is to prove our smartness. And the reason it's worth mentioning here tonight, I think, is that is one of the hardest, I would think, I only do it occasionally. You're on the front lines all the time. I would think it's one of the hardest things in a training program to achieve, is to tell people and show people how to use this time and nurture this time, but realize that shining in this realm and being perceived as the smartest kid in the class will not always serve you in later times. It's a terrible challenge that kids who've gone to school 12, 16, 20 years then have to leave school, and how you prepare them for that, I do not know, but bless you that you do. I'll share this with you, again, for whatever it's worth. The laughs have kind of gone away, haven't they? I'll share this with you for whatever it's worth. oftentimes on the streets of New York or elsewhere, but often in the Broadway district, somebody will say, oh, Mr. Winfield, we met at the master class in such and such. And often I'm impressed with myself that I really remember the young person. Sometimes I don't. But very often this young person will say, with excruciating sincerity and need, I graduated a year ago, and things have gone very well since then. And but I wondered if I could just sit down with you, and I'd just love to pick your brain for a couple of hours. That's when I think, well, yeah, it's a hard transition, and you haven't quite made it yet, because a couple of hours. Even if I would love to, and often I would, it's just a couple of hours don't exist in the rough and tumble freelance world out there. And so how you do it, I have no idea, but I salute you for doing everything you can to prepare kids for the fact that for all these years, all the attention is on them, and then after that, it will be a different deal. Auditioning. I don't audition all that well, but I'll do it for the rest of my life, mainly because, well, partly because I'm just in that tier of actors. If I were to say, offers only, I'm sorry, I don't know. My manager would say, okay. Vacation time for you. So how do we prepare kids to audition? How do we keep ourselves prepared as auditioners? The only thing I can say is it's a chance to work. It's a chance to work, and it is the cruelest and the awfulest system, but it is a chance to work. And so when you're sitting there and you're supposed to go in 2 hours ago, and they're saying, I'm so sorry, thank you for waiting, all you people, thank you. You're going to get a chance to work. Probably will be short, probably will be quick and never heard from again, but it's a chance to work. Here's a thought, though, that may be of actual nuts and bolts use to young students. I think it's very important to get yourself in with casting people and to explore the possibility of being a reader in casting, in professional casting. You have to be very, very, very careful. And this is advice I would give to any young people. You have to be very careful that you don't get thought of as a reader, because then you will never be considered in the casting pool. And we've seen it happen with a kind of cruelty in the room where person after person auditions and the person doing the reading is fantastic and the auditioners go, just don't think we've found him yet. Who could we get? And they look right at the young actor who could do it beautifully. It's not going to happen because that's not the way things are set up. So you do have to be careful. But the opportunity to be in that room is a gift, because you see auditioner after auditioner. It's the greatest people watching and professional people watching opportunity ever. And even though the great Sandy Meisner said, actors should be interested in everything except acting and themselves. That is a good axiom to keep in mind, but it doesn't actually finally work. If you get yourselves in an auditioning room, you will see actor after actor come in. You will see what their strengths are, what their weaknesses, how they sabotage themselves at the top when they don't. And it is an incredible experience for young people, if taken with care. What about the craft of character? And here we get to, at last, to play. It's old, it's hackneyed, I know it's easy because I've done it myself. That's an old idea, we all know that. But the idea of asking ourselves when we're playing another character, what do I want? It is the lifeline. I find myself all the time, I'm going to do an SVU, a day's work on Law and Order on Tuesday. The scripts are coming in, I find myself, I should be smarter at this age, but I wonder if I should be forceful there. Sad there. And as soon as any of us, actors, young or old, get past that short-sightedness and start looking for the active process of what we want, what the person we're playing wants, all those questions fall into place, or tend to. So I can never be reminded too many times as an actor, what do I want by a director or by myself? It's a great piece of checklist craft. Grievance. I find this very, very useful as an actor and looking for the way into a character. What is that character's grievance? And not so long ago at an MFA program, I realized working with these very smart, very talented kids that they had just, in trying to hear what the master teacher was saying, we had just miscommunicated with each other, and they were thinking I was meaning grieving. It's a very trendy kind of work now, the work of grieving, the work of mourning. It's important. But it is trendy, and they were going, I couldn't understand. I said, I'm sorry, I'm grievance, axe grinding, the less pretty side of human character. What does a character, well, first of all, what is danger for a character and the human genius of backpedaling away from danger? What is that character's grievance and axe to grind? I had the incredible gift of getting to play two of Edward Albee's plays. And when it comes to the question of what does a character want, I will tell you a showbiz story. Here it goes. On a Broadway stage with Sally Field, one of our remarkable practitioners. The end of that play, it is truly a remarkable play by Mr. Albee, and one of the shortest. The end of that play, some of the weirdest stuff happens, culminating a lot of weird things that have been talked about. An entrance is made onto the stage that is so startling and odd that every night there were different reactions. Sometimes people would gasp and become deadly quiet. Sometimes people would start laughing. Some people were talking. Is that happening? And so there was a juncture in the play, whether it was going well or badly, there was a juncture where there was often something that you had to negotiate through, along with cell phones and Broadway paper rattling and everything. There was a point late in the play when just to be heard was a certain kind of craft challenge. And one night, people were talking and sort of chortling. I can't play with it. And the lines that I was saying on stage, the three of us on stage, I lifted my voice and spoke through that. And it got quiet. And afterwards, not Sally, because I think she may have been a little smarter, maybe ahead of the curve, but some of the other people in the other studies went, hey, good work. It's one of the most fatal things we can be told or we can feel about ourselves on stage. I did good work. So I did some of that congratulating, and over the next few nights, I often came to that place and spoke through it. And I became guilty so deeply within a few days of doing that great show business story about the actor who asks for the laugh instead of a cup of tea. I was talking to the audience directly about how you should listen to what we're saying here, instead of pursuing what I wanted. And one night, Sally had a line at the end, toward the end of the play, which is a line I hadn't really registered very fully until that night. She said it. She seemed to kind of spread her hands as if to say, this line costs me. And she said it to me in a way that made the audience go immediately quiet. She employed that buzzword that we all use in acting class. She employed vulnerability to gather the audience's attention. And when I just remember I was in sort of a kneeling position looking up here, and I thought, oh shit, I've really been blowing it the last few nights. I have not been thinking about what I wanted from her. I've been thinking about what I wanted from the audience. And, standing ovation, please. That's what we all want. But that's why that kind of thinking will sidetrack us from the action on the stage. So, again, what do I want as my lifeline as an actor? Grievance. after playing that play of Edward Albee's, not everyone loves this play, but Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, I think is a truly great play. At least the language is very great, and you can invest yourself in it for a long time. I had an instinct and clung to it even when people said, I don't know, that George, the character whom I played, had a grievance that showed in his body. His chest was sunken. Also, that seemed to me to tell the story of his living intensely in his head, and that being part of his grievance. He's not as strong as the strapping young man who comes in. Always seems to me that George needs to, or somehow or other in the resonance of the casting of that play, George has to look up at Nick and decide, hey, I'm not gonna meet him or challenge him any other way except with my wit and my brain, and that's what I set in motion. So the center of the body of a man who lives in his head became the expressive center by retreating, not asserting. You know, this is Nick. I never was right for Nick, and certainly not. But this then became George, and it had to do with expressing, telling the story of grievance. It's not pretty about human beings, or it's not inspiring, but it seems to me a useful and important storytelling muscle. Grievance and its cousin, self-loathing. It's not easy, it doesn't feel entirely appropriate to sit with strapping, often handsome, attractive young people and tell them that really to ply this craft, self-loathing is something you need to take a look at. But in all the plays, Samuel Beckett, Edward Albee, Deb Margolis, probably Jane Chambers, and I will know her plays better after tonight. The questions of self-loathing are inherent. This has gotten very far away from play. But actually, I hope that it hasn't. Yeah. So let me return to something that I am excited about to finish up here. We talk about story and our hunger for story. As we look at the theater and take it different directions, story starts to mean lots of different things. The work of Samuel Beckett, which I love and hate, I would like to reach into the grave and strangle the man, but I cannot not think about doing his plays. This is an idea that I'm excited about. I shared with you for whatever it may be worth. His plays can never be summed up by a keynote speaker at any time. But one of the things I think going on, or at least one of the things that gives me an energy, is to look at them as the story of consciousness. So if you take his great play, Waiting for Godot, it is, of course, it's about two guys standing by a road, and they're cold and they're damp and they're uncomfortable. That's an important part of the story, but it's not the whole story. And you watch people, fellow practitioners, we tend to go at that play and fail, and then we go at it again. We have to. And you hear people say, you know what it is? It's vaudeville. It's vaudeville, that's all it is. And they mount a vaudeville production. And you get some interesting things going, but that's not the whole play. You talk about people who find an absolutely true sensory notion of being cold and waiting. And that's a lot of the play, but it's not the whole play. I think one of the threads that has been important for me is the story of consciousness, because when you read about Beckett, he was very interested in the way the mind worked and the notion of me, myself, and I. And so that's an important clue for that play, P-L-A-Y, that that I am excited about and wanted to share with you. Here's a little bit of a piece not from that play, but Texts for Nothing is a great piece of writing, not always valued by Beckett's scholars. Even Mr. Beckett himself didn't speak all that highly of it. But he wrote it right around the time that he was writing the Godot play. And let me just give you a snatch of a couple of passages stuck together from text number 11. It seems to me to get exciting and to start to take life when I think of it as me, myself, and I. Otherwise, it is a really rough piece of text to look at. It goes like this. When I think, no, that won't work. When come those who knew me, perhaps even know me still by sight, of course, or by smell. It's as though, come on, I don't know, I shouldn't have begun. If I began again, setting my mind to it, that sometimes gives good results. It's worth trying. I'll try it one of these days, or one of these evenings, or this evening. Why not this evening, before I disappear from up here, from down there, scattered by the everlasting words? Oh, what am I saying, scattered? Isn't that just what I'm not? Just what I'm not. It's wandering. My mind was wandering, just the very thing I'm not. And it's still the same old road I'm trudging up, yes, and down, no, toward one yet to be named, so that he may leave me in peace. Be in peace. Be no more. Have never been. Tell, no, nothing can be told. Name, no, nothing can be named. What then? I don't know. I shouldn't have begun. We're getting on. And when come those who knew me, quick. No, premature. But peekaboo, here I come again, just when most needed, like the square root of -1. And that is why, when comes the hour of those who knew me, this time it's going to work. When comes the hour of those who knew me, it's as though I were among them. That is what I have to say. Among them, watching me approach and watching me recede, shaking my head and saying, is it really he? Can it possibly be he? Then moving on in their company along a road that is not mine, and with every step takes me further from that other, not mine either, or remaining alone where I am between two parting dreams, knowing none, known of none. That finally is what I had to say. That is all I can have to say this evening. Now, that would be a wonderful place to stop a keynote, but you're very kind, thank you. But I want to barrel forward and take a passage of Mr. Beckett's Godot play, which I find it can be usefully, or for me, usefully enlivened with the same idea. If you don't mind, I'll do it a cappella, meaning with my hat on. It also is a study in context. If this were a civilian audience, we would have done context, way back. You could say on day one of the conference, you could say, what shall we say of today? Or you can say it in the context of this speech, and this is the power of context. It changes everything. This is one of my favorite pieces of theater writing. I don't entirely get it, but I'm going to stay at it for the rest of my life, I think. And I'm trying to look at it from the point of view of this, it being the story of consciousness. Was I sleeping while the others suffered? Am I sleeping now? Tomorrow when I wake, or think I do, what shall I say of today? That with Estragon, my friend, at this place until the fall of night, I waited for Godot, that Pazzo passed with his carrier, that he spoke to us, probably, but in all that, what truth will there be? He'll know nothing. He'll tell me about the blows he received, and I'll give him a carrot, astride of a grave and a difficult birth. Down in the hole, lingeringly, the gravedigger puts on the 4 steps. We have time to grow old. The air is full of our cries, but habit is a great deadener. And me too, someone is looking of me too. Someone is saying, he knows nothing. He is sleeping. Let him sleep on. I can't go on. What have I said? And then one of the great stage directions ever, something like rushes to and fro, stops left, broods. Enter the boy. So that is a passage of a great play that I'm trying to, speaking of a life in the theater, and we'll keep trying to look at as a story of consciousness. However, that also would be a wonderful place to stop the keynote for people who've been at a conference all day. I do have one other offering I would love to throw your way. And it is a piece, my apologies to the wonderful sound guys, for doing a costume change while speaking into the lavalier mic. This is a piece of full-out baggy pants offering. I dedicate it to the ATHE, and it is, or I will endeavor to make it informed by grievance, by generational antipathy, by the challenges of being an elder, and I will do it in full baggy pants rig. Oh no, you're too kind. You're too kind. You're too easy. What I propose is to conclude this very talky keynote with, like I say, an offering. And I have been told that there is a musician. Yeah, I'm sure he's young. They're all young. I'd like to introduce someone with whom the conference has united me as Mr. Jonathan Lynch, who is, What kind of music do you play, Mr. Lynch?
Some jazz.
You see the magnitude of the challenge here. Mr. Lynch, here's what I propose, is that I will proceed with an offering. I don't know whether the baggy pants tradition has any, if you have any familiarity, never mind. What I propose is that I offer an old Broadway standard in the form of a novelty song. I don't know if the term novelty song has any meaning for you. Never mind. But it is, I feel, an appropriate number here that I would like to offer to conclude this keynote and ask you please just to observe, learn, try to catch the feeling of the musicianship if you feel like you want to join me without overwhelming. Please do so. I hope you might find it useful. The intro goes something like this. You see what I'm doing harmonically here. Kids. I don't know what's wrong with these kids today. Who can understand anything they say? Watch this.
disobedient, disrespectful, oh-something noisy, crazy, sloppy, lazy, loafers, and while we're on the subject, it's not bad. You can talk and talk till your face is blue. Kids. But they still do just what they want to do. Together, let's go. I promise. Okay, lay out here. Why can't they be like we were back in the 60s? Perfect in every way. What's the matter with all these kids today? Yeah, that's nice. See, the thing is, they don't know how to pick up on a cultural cue. That should be stop time, young man. It's right here. That's not bad. Add the bass line. Yeah, and now take us home, young man. Oh! They just need leadership, and we just need the theater. Thank God I hadn't noticed that image before. I mean, it does set up one of the oldest gags in the book. Thank you very much. The theater is an indescribable place. You can never sum it up. I have lived a lot of life in it, and it is such an honor to be asked to share any of that life with you here at ATHE. Bless you in the work you do. Keep the faith, and I'll see you around the campus.
In order to get everyone to the reception so that Bill can actually mingle for a little bit with you at the reception and to give him time to change, I'm just going to bring him up and ask him to take one more bow to thank him, and we're going to send you off to the reception.